On that afternoon in 1964, the town of Gary, Indiana, was bathed in the pale, golden light typical of late autumn days as the sun began to set, casting its glow upon the old brick walls of the auditorium where my sons, the Jackson Five, were preparing to perform. Back then, everyone in town was buzzing with anticipation, speaking of those Jackson boys. And inside a mother's heart like mine, pride mingled with apprehension. But among all my children, there was one little boy who caused me the most concern. Michael, the youngest, just 6 years old, his eyes always wide, sparkling with curiosity, yet tinged with shyness. The backstage area before a show is always a place of controlled chaos. Quick talking voices, hurried footsteps, the sound of shoes hitting the wooden floor, the drums from the main stage echoing in rhythmic beats, as if the entire building shared one nervous heartbeat. Michael's brothers were busy adjusting their vests, checking their guitar straps, changing microphone batteries. I still vividly recall the image of each one. Jackie with his composed demeanor, Tito focused intently on his guitar, Jermaine straightening his collar. Adults were rushing back and forth to prepare for the fast-approaching curtain time. In that world of sound and motion, my youngest boy, Michael, who was only waist-high to the adults, tried to grasp everything with a child's intuition. He trailed after Jackie for a few minutes, then scurried over to Tito's side, spinning within the stream of people as if trying not to be separated. But the backstage that day was too crowded, too fast, like a torrent. Just one long curtain drawn across like a moving wall, or a speaker box pushed too hastily, was enough for Michael to be swept away from his brother's embrace. And just as any mother's fear would predict, with just a split-second lapse of attention, Michael was lost. A crew member hurried past, pulling a huge speaker box, the long curtain sweeping the wooden floor, obscuring everything behind it. When the little boy looked up, Jackie was no longer there. Tito had vanished too. There were only shadows of strangers flitting by, quickly, urgently, no one truly noticing a child breathing rapidly, searching for familiarity. In that fleeting moment, Michael, the youngest in the family, stood alone. The yellow-orange lights from the backstage area shone down on his curly hair, casting his small shadow long on the floor. I still clearly remember the feeling of thinking about Michael then, his little eyes darting quickly through the crowd, trying to find a familiar face. But the busy adults just swept past him, as if he had always been a part of this chaotic picture. No one realized he was lost. From the stage, the rehearsal music swelled louder, like an invisible door slowly closing behind him, pushing him into a vast and unfamiliar space. He called out for Jackie, called out for Tito. I know his voice must have been tiny then, but the cry was immediately swallowed by the sound check and the stage director shouting instructions. I thought about this for many years afterward. At 6 years old, everything in that place was too big, too bright, too loud, and my son was too small. Later, there were many accounts that Michael vanished for a few minutes, causing everyone to panic and search. I don't know if those stories were embellished, but I clearly remember my intense anxiety then. Michael was nowhere to be seen. For a mother, even 1 minute is too long. But no matter how many stories circulated about that day, I believe Michael's feelings in that moment were profoundly real. He felt isolated, tiny, and the world was overwhelmingly huge. He stood in the narrow hallway where dim light fell upon hastily taped posters. Those posters, with drawings of microphones, music notes, and show titles written in chalk, must have confused him. I imagine the little boy looking at them, as if searching for an answer to a lost child's question. What should I do? Where am I? No one turned back long enough to realize he wasn't waiting for anyone. He was afraid. And even if only for a few minutes, I know he had to fight the fear that crept up his spine. But the detail that stays with me is this. Parallel to that fear, another feeling began to flicker inside him: excitement. Michael was always like that. Even when trembling, he was drawn towards the stage. He knew, it's almost my turn. Even at a young age, Michael was used to singing in front of an audience. But I knew the expectation was always a heavy pressure. His heart beat faster, not just from fear, but because the stage lights seemed to have their own magnetic force, calling him closer. He looked towards the black curtain, where light from the stage shone and glittered. He took a tiny step, then paused, took a deep breath, then took another step. I could picture every movement as if seeing it right before my eyes. While his brothers and I were running everywhere searching for him, Michael was gradually inching toward the stage. He could have turned back to find his brothers. But the heart of an artist, even one newly awakened, told him something else. When I think about that moment, I always feel it was like a turning point that people later called destiny. It wasn't calculated. It was the instinct of a child, but a special child. He turned toward the light, took a deep breath, and kept walking, trembling, but not stopping. Perhaps he knew, however vaguely, that to find his family, he had to go through the stage. That was a 6-year-old's decision, but it was also the foundation that built the man Michael Jackson later became, always stepping forward, whether the path ahead was brilliant or dark. Somewhere, his brothers and I were calling his name, but in Michael's mind at that moment, there was only his heartbeat blending with the drum rhythm echoing from the stage. He moved closer, one small step at a time, until the stage lights illuminated his face. And that image, though I only heard it recounted, and from the anxiety I endured, always remains vividly clear in my mind. The 6-year-old boy, lost backstage, was preparing to step into the place where destiny awaited. Standing in the wings, watching the curtain close behind Michael, I, as his mother, could never forget the feeling my heart endured. Though I only heard it recounted, and from my pieced-together memories, I could clearly imagine his every movement as if I were standing right there, just behind my son, watching his every tiny breath. And when the auditorium erupted after the high note Michael had just sung, my heart seemed to stop for a few seconds. Not from surprise, but because I realized that, right at that moment, my son had crossed the boundary of childhood in a way no other child could. The applause continued, a continuous pounding rhythm. I heard people whispering backstage, their voices mixed with astonishment and delight. That little boy. My goodness, he actually did it. The youngest Jackson is something else, but amidst all that praise, I knew Michael hadn't yet realized what he was creating. He just stood there, his breath still shaky, his small shoulders rising slightly with every inhale. He looked down at the audience with a vague gaze, as if still trying to understand. Did I do it right? Did they like it? I could imagine Michael's tiny hand clutching the microphone stand, not to pose or keep rhythm, but to find stability in the moment when the world outside suddenly gave him its full attention. For a 6-year-old child, that was both a miracle and a challenge. Behind the stage, Michael's brothers were then scrambling to find him. Jackie almost rushed onto the stage immediately when he saw Michael standing there alone. Tito was so startled he dropped his guitar, while Jermaine and Marlon kept asking everyone if they had seen which way the little boy had gone. I still clearly remember the moment they looked out at the stage, saw Michael singing under the dazzling lights. Those children, though young, were struck silent. They didn't know whether to run out to greet him or to stay put so as not to break his moment. And then, It was as if they all understood this was Michael's time, a moment that belonged only to him. I believe that right then, something inside him changed, not because of the applause, not because of the attention, but because for the first time, he felt where he truly belonged, the stage. The song ended with a prolonged, sustained note, not perfectly technical, not accurate in every pitch, but so full of emotion that even the experienced adults nearby fell silent. When Michael lowered the microphone, his voice was still shaky, his hand slightly sweaty, but his eyes were bright like two small flames. A few more seconds of silence passed, then another wave of applause, even more fierce, as if the entire auditorium agreed they had just witnessed something that surpassed expectation. In the front row, someone stood up for the second time. A few people clapped their hands on their knees, leaning forward to get a better look at the boy who had just sung. Some women placed their hands on their chests, smiling radiantly, and an elderly woman, according to the account, wiped the corner of her eye, whispering to the person next to her, "This child. There is something truly special about him." And Michael, in the eye of the applause storm, just stood still, his small shoulders subtly moving with his breath, his lips curling into the shy smile I had known since he first began to babble. He didn't know what he had just done, but he knew it made people happy. And for a 6-year-old child, that was enough. But what moved me more than anything was the moment that followed. Michael turned, intending to walk back inside, and just then, his gaze fell upon the wings, where his brothers were standing watching him. All 4 of them had wide eyes, as if they couldn't believe what had just happened. Jackie raised his hand to wave, but lowered it, as if he too was trying to suppress his emotion. Tito smiled, a smile mixed with bewilderment and pride. Jermaine leaned back, as if he had just witnessed a miracle. And Marlon, younger but still older than Michael, burst into an astonished laugh. Michael looked at each one, and then his little lips curved into a genuine smile. Not a smile for the audience, but the smile of a child who had found his family again amidst the light and the applause. When he walked inside, the heavy curtain closed behind him like a conclusion to that moment. But in reality, it was only the beginning. I saw it clearly in his eyes, a silent transformation, a new self-awareness, as if his little heart had found its own voice. Michael ran straight to his brothers, and the first thing he did was not to boast, not to laugh loudly, not to ask if everyone liked it. He hugged Jackie, a quick, small hug, but enough to say, "I was scared." Then he turned to Tito, Jermaine, Marlon, his eyes still shining, as if to make sure they were truly there. And his brothers, each in their own way, bent down to return his embrace. I stood a few steps away, watching it all. And in that moment, I understood. What the audience called talent was to me simply the heart of a child, my son, finding his way through fear. Michael's gift was not perfection. It has never been perfection. But the ability to step forward in moments when he should have retreated. That moment, for the world, was just a memorable performance by a little boy. But for me, it was the moment I saw Michael truly become himself, a lost boy, a nascent singer, a soul both fragile and surprisingly strong, stepping alone into the light and shining. When I saw Michael's final note conclude the performance in that resounding applause, I didn't just see him standing there as a child artist. I saw him being lifted by the very energy current of the entire auditorium. The lights reflected on his soft, curly hair, making it look as if he was radiating with every move. I couldn't forget the feeling of watching him recoil slightly, his small shoulders trembling amidst the noisy ocean of sound. and then bravely lifting his face again, as if he wanted to clearly see every cheering face, to be sure that the applause was real, not a dream. Michael's brothers rushed closer to the wings then, as if just waiting for the moment Michael stepped back to envelop him in a hug. Jackie's face was beaming in a way I rarely saw. Gone was his usual composure, replaced by an outburst of pride, like an elder brother who had just witnessed something beyond imagination. Tito nudged Jermaine's shoulder, their eyes both alight as if infused with fire. Marlon, though younger, stood on his toes, his mouth stretched into a wide smile, as if he himself couldn't fathom how Michael, the boy who used to be afraid of the dark when sleeping alone, could have done that. I remember those moments so clearly that sometimes when I close my eyes, all the sounds and lights of that 1964 stage flood back. The audience wasn't just applauding, they seemed to be sending their hearts into those sounds. Many raised their hands to wave, trying to catch Michael's attention, as if they wanted to say, "Little one, you did great." A few men stood up slowly, shaking their heads in disbelief, and I heard one remark to his neighbor. "If this is 6 years old, I dare not imagine what the boy will be like later." But what moved me the most was not the adulation. It was Michael's reaction to it. My son stood there, his breath quick, his chest heaving as if he had run a long distance. He blinked repeatedly, not just because the lights were too bright, but because he was trying to maintain his composure amidst the fervor rushing towards him. His lips parted as if to say something, perhaps "thank you," perhaps just a choked breath, but then he said nothing. He only bowed slightly, humble and shy, true to his age. But right after that slight bow, I saw something flash in his eyes, a small but sharp gleam, a spark of recognition, a sense of realizing he had just touched something he had never touched before. And I knew, with a mother's intuition, that his small heart had sensed its place on this grand stage. The stories woven about Michael kneeling or raising his hand to catch the light from heaven, I have heard for years. They add color to the story, but I know the truth is simpler. Michael was just a child trying to find his footing. And it is that simple truth that makes the moment so unforgettable. There was no perfect script, no director's staging, only instinct, the instinct of a child born to sing. The audience didn't just look at Michael as a phenomenon. They looked at him as if witnessing a door opening before their very eyes. In the crowd, the low murmur of discussion began to emerge. "This boy is going far. The youngest Jackson is the one to watch. Look at the way he sings." Those weren't fleeting praises. They carried the intuition of adults who had seen countless performances in their lives. They sensed what people call a born star. Michael probably didn't fully comprehend that then, but he felt the emotion. I knew my son well. He always reacted with his heart before his mind, and that heart was beating in a uniquely rapid way. It wasn't like when he was running around playing, nor was it like when he was scared. It was the rhythm of realization. I am standing in the right place. I saw Michael's small hand still gripping the microphone, his fingers slightly tense, as if he didn't want to let go yet. Not because he didn't dare leave the stage, but because some part of him wanted to hold the moment longer, wanted to hear more applause, wanted to feel that warmth and pride a little bit more. A 6-year-old child cannot analyze deeply, but that child's heart already knew how to resonate in its own way, and I stood there watching him and spontaneously felt time stand still. For an instant, I no longer saw my little boy, the child who always toddled after his brothers, but saw a different figure, a tiny artist standing in the light, who knew how to turn fear into a flame. As the prolonged applause finally began to subside, Michael at last took a small step back, as if seeking stability. He glanced quickly towards the wings, where his family was standing. And in that look, I saw a silent question. "Mama, did I do well?" That question didn't need to be spoken aloud. I heard it with my own heart. And even as the auditorium continued to cheer, even as the bright lights still shone down, I knew that the small moment in his eyes was what would shape Michael for years to come. Not the fame, not the applause, but the desire to do well, to do truly well, so as not to disappoint those who loved him. The audience continued to stand. The whistles, the stomping, the calls of Michael's name crashed like waves onto the shore. And amidst all those sounds, I saw him take a deep, deep breath, as if drawing all that strength into his heart. It wasn't the breath of a trembling child, but the first breath of an artist stepping into his own world. When I saw Michael standing there, in the fragile interlude between the stage lights dimming and the backstage returning to its normal rhythm, my heart tightened in a very strange way. My son, only 6 years old, stood so still that I thought he had turned to stone along with the last fading rays on the wooden floor. But it wasn't because he was afraid. It wasn't because he was tired. It was because that small soul was absorbing every layer of emotion that had just washed over him, as if he didn't want to miss anything from that rare moment. I saw Michael raise his hand to lightly touch his mouth, a small gesture as if he was checking if the voice he just sang with truly belonged to him. Then he looked down at his small hands, which seemed to still be slightly trembling from the sensation of holding the microphone and standing in such intense light. At that time, he didn't know that those hands, over time, would become the instruments that created countless moments of wonder for millions of people. He only knew he had just done something bigger than anything he had ever experienced. Michael's brothers began to talk more animatedly after the first moment of amazement, but Michael hadn't rejoined that flow yet. He still looked toward the curtain, as if the stage held the answer to something only he could perceive. And in that very gaze, I understood that my son was stepping into a world that I, even as his mother, couldn't fully follow. The backstage area was quieter now, only a few scuffling shoes, the sound of someone folding a speaker cable, and the organizers discussing the next act. The atmosphere after a show always carries a very special kind of afterglow, like the trace of a big event that just happened. And Michael stood in the middle of that afterglow like a note that hadn't quite faded. A sound technician walked by, saw Michael standing still, and let out a small laugh. Not a mocking one, but the kind of laugh that comes from surprise mixed with affection. He quietly said, "Little man did it. He really did it." I heard that sentence and felt a slight chill run down my spine. Not fear, but the realization that this moment didn't just change my son, it changed the way the world looked at him. Michael finally turned around. He looked at me. His eyes were shining, but not from tears, but from a light that is very hard to describe. I knelt down to his eye level, and in that instant, I realized Michael had aged several years in just a few minutes, a maturity unseen in his body, but in his eyes. He walked slowly to my side, and for the first time since the performance ended, he opened his mouth to speak. His voice was small, shaky, but not weak. "Mama." They liked it. 3 simple words, but they contained an entire world. I placed my hand on his shoulder and nodded gently. "Yes, baby. They loved it." And I knew I didn't need to say anything else. Because in Michael's voice, there was something that the entire auditorium, no matter how much they applauded, couldn't touch. His own surprise at discovering the power within himself. Right then, Jackie ran over, put his arm around Michael's shoulder, and pulled him into the group as if trying to hold him. to keep him from drifting alone in that unquantifiable wave of emotion. Jackie spoke, his voice both proud and choked. "You scared us all half to death. But my gosh, Michael, you were amazing." Tito nodded rapidly, while Jermaine laughed loudly as if trying to release his emotions. Marlon, who was usually attached to Michael, said nothing, just gripped his hand tightly. But I, the mother standing nearby, saw something his brothers hadn't seen. Michael had heard the words, had smiled, but his mind wasn't fully there anymore. He heard, but didn't completely hear. He looked, but didn't completely look. Not because he was distracted, but because he had left a part of his mind on the stage, where the light shone directly and the whole world seemed to be waiting. I understood that sometimes there are moments too grand for a child's soul, so much so that they must stand still for their heart to catch up. And that was exactly what was happening to Michael. Then a small sound echoed from the stage, the sound of someone testing a guitar note while packing up. Just one sound, but enough to make Michael startle and turn back. That was the first time I clearly saw that the stage, for him, was not just a place to perform. It was like a calling, as if the light didn't just shine on him, but called his name. Michael took a deep breath, the very same breath I used to hear him take before singing when he was very young. Then he said a short sentence, the sentence I believe marked the starting point of his entire future artistic life. "Mama, I want to go again." Not a request for permission, not a question, but an acknowledgement that his heart had been awakened. And I knew, from that moment on, that my son, though only 6, though still having much to understand, had found his place, and the path ahead would not only be paved with applause, but with loneliness, pressure, hope, and a profound love for music. In the dimming backstage light, Michael didn't just leave that performance's stage. He left his peaceful childhood to step into a world where art and destiny awaited. Years later, whenever I saw Michael standing on those gigantic stages, where the lights were so intense they blurred the line between the artist and the world, I would often recall that small evening in Gary. Even if tens of thousands of people were screaming his name, I still saw the image of the 6-year-old boy trembling before the too-tall microphone, his hands lightly grasping the stand as if clinging to the only anchor in that vast world. And the strange thing is that Michael, though he reached unimaginable heights, never allowed himself to forget that starting moment. There were nights after a show, back in his room, when he would still tell me about that first time I was on stage, as if the memory was always ready, only needing to be summoned to awaken. Michael once told me that first stage was like a door God opened, but to step through, he had to find the key himself. And he found it by looking straight into the light and not retreating. Sometimes I wonder if that night his brothers had guided him to the right spot, if he hadn't gotten lost, if he hadn't had to face that too-tall microphone alone, would everything be different? But then I understood. It was that unexpected jolt, that momentary solitude, that helped my son see the courage hidden within him that even a mother like me had never clearly seen. As Michael's career grew with time, as his tours conquered Asia, Europe, and America, as his every song became a cultural icon, I still felt that 6-year-old child had never disappeared. He only grew up in a very strange way. The more he became a legend, the more he clung to his original foundation, as if fearing that losing the starting point would cause him to lose his way. And thus, in every calculated dance move, in every movement that seemed spontaneous but was intensely precise, I always saw the shadow of a little boy finding his way to the stage amidst a chaotic backstage. Many people have asked me when I knew Michael was born for the stage. I always answered that I knew it even before he stood on the first big stage of his life. I heard it in his voice, saw it in his eyes, felt it in the way he merged with music as if music was his breath. But that evening, when Michael walked out into the light without anyone leading him, I knew he wasn't just born for music. He was born to give it to the world, and the world received it in a way no one could have anticipated. America embraced him. Then came Europe, Asia, Africa, and the whole planet seemed to revolve around his rhythmic steps. I have stood at many concerts, amidst seas of people incessantly screaming, "Michael, Michael!" And in every echo, I always heard a tiny sound, the applause of the Gary Auditorium, a cheer of less than 100 people, yet holding the power of the entire future. As a mother, I witnessed my son grow up amidst glory, but also amidst pressure. Michael always carried a very personal fear of not being enough, fear of no longer making others feel, fear of not being able to recreate that initial magical feeling. He didn't fear failure in an adult way, but in the way of the child who once sang a note that made the entire audience stand up, and from then on, always hoped, always wished that the next note would do the same. That was joy mixed with burden, light mixed with shadow, the desire to be loved and recognized in the purest way. I remember once, when Michael was a global superstar, he sat next to me after a show in London. The lights in the room were reduced to a few weak golden bulbs. He was silent for a long time before saying, "Mama, every stage is like that first small stage in Gary. I always see it." I looked at him and understood immediately. Even standing before thousands of people, Michael's soul retained the feeling of that 6-year-old child, the feeling of both wanting to run away in fear and wanting to move forward out of love. I think that very parallel existence between fear and love, between trembling and courage, created what the world later called Michael Jackson's charisma. No one can accurately describe it, no one can replicate it, because it wasn't technique, it wasn't strategy. It was the summation of emotional layers formed from that first night. Solitude, pure joy, surprise, silent determination, and the fervent desire to create a genuine moment for the person watching. When Michael stood on the greatest stages of his life, when the crowd roared like a storm, when the cheers of tens of thousands merged into a sound that was almost surreal, he still maintained one very small habit, pausing for 1 second before walking out. That second, whether at a show in Rome or Tokyo, whether before thousands of fans or during a closed dress rehearsal, carried the same meaning. It was the second he returned to the 6-year-old boy, standing alone behind the stage curtain in Gary, not fully understanding what awaited, but knowing he had to step up. And when he stepped up, the entire world seemed to light up. Looking back at Michael's life, both the dazzling peaks and the low notes everyone must experience, I understand that everything is connected to that first moment. A child standing alone, placing his hand on the microphone himself, lifting his voice himself, and deciding himself that he would keep going, whether it was dark or light, whether there was applause or silence ahead. That is why, in a mother's heart like mine, the image of the 6-year-old boy in Gary never fades. It is the foundation, the beginning, the first flame. And no matter how far Michael went, no matter how much of a legend he became, I always see him as the little child moving toward the light, his eyes wide open, his heart pounding, and his tiny but determined voice ringing out in the stillness. A small moment, a golden lit afternoon, an old stage curtain, and a little boy who found his way to the light, and then carried that light across the world.